Sweet Enola Gay. That was some kind of an introduction we had there. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am so happy to be here, and I am so honored to be talking to our guest today. Um, I could run through her credits, and then our half hour would be up, and we'd have to go home without speaking to her. But I'm really excited that Ellen Datlow, editor extreme editor extremely good, and in this case, editor extreme is with us because her new book, Body Shocks, which is Extreme Tales of Body Horror, has just come out. Today is release day, I believe, and let me give you a couple of Ellen's credits quickly before I bring her out here. Hugo Award winner, World Horror Grandmaster, multiple Hugo Awards, Bram Stoker, Locus, Shirley Jackson Awards, on and on and on. She was a fiction editor at Omni for a couple of years, I think maybe 20. And she has not slowed down one bit. Always has multiple books coming out in every year. So let me introduce to you right now editor Ellen Datlow, who I am so proud to have with us today.
Well, hi, Dale. I'm so pleased to see you for the first time in I don't know how long.
Isn't that the truth? And with no masks, we're just here
That's
kind of
right.
taking
I
it
can put my
easy.
mask on, but no, we don't
I
need
was
it.
I was looking at some things the other day, and you know what? We've known each other about 25 years.
Wow.
About the yeah, it's been a while. So it's really good to have you on, kind of a good acquaintance to be talking to, and you and I have done some of the same things like eat dinner. Outside of that, you have done so much more in the book world.
No, 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 no. Hey, you're a bookseller. Without you, we wouldn't exist.
That that's true, but wow. And you had another book come out earlier this year, a couple of weeks ago, which was a Shirley Jackson inspired anthology, right?
Yes, when things get dark.
And that
Stories
was
inspired
stories.
by Shirley Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's amazing. It just keeps coming. You have more coming this year.
I have one more, hopefully, unless it gets delayed. The Best Horror of the Year, number 13, is coming out in November.
How
So.
are these, like the ones you used to do with Terry? How do these best of compare to that?
Well, when I did it with Terry, first of all, Jim Frankel was our packager, and Terry and I just we didn't do the same thing. I mean, she was into the fantasy, I was into horror. We didn't compare the stories. We didn't read each other's stories unless Jim thought that the story might be. We might sometimes choose the same story and look at it from a fantasy point of view or from a horror point of view. We each had the same amount of wordage. We each had about 125,000 words for our half. And Jim is the one who figured out the order to mix them around. Um, so doing the best horror is just me. And because I didn't have that much involvement with the year's best fantasy and horror. I mean, in fantasy, I didn't. So in a way, the work I'm doing is not different, because I was always concentrating on the horror, and I'm still doing that now. So it's not
But
all that different.
you have anthologized in many different genres. I mean, sci-fi. You have done fantasy. You've done
Hmm.
horror. Do you have a particular love? Because I know your sci-fi goes back to Omni magazine at least.
Hmm.
So do you prefer one over the other? Is horror what you prefer? Or?
Well, it's funny because I started as a kid. I read everything. I read science fiction, fantasy, and horror. But I do realize that I mostly read short fiction, or at least that's what I was mostly interested in. And once I got into publishing, at Omni, I was mostly editing science fiction, short fiction, and I loved it. But I also wanted to occasionally buy a short story that might be horror. But early on in my career at Omni, I was not allowed to because I know you can't buy horror. We're not doing horror. Although Ben Bova is the one who bought Sand Kings by George R. R. Martin, but it was science fiction horror, so I guess he felt it fit. So I started actually editing horror anthologies so that I wouldn't have a conflict of interest with what I was doing for Omni, which, as I said, was mostly science fiction. So that's how I got into editing horror anthologies. And I found out, I mean, I really love horror short fiction. And in a way, I kind of prefer it. I mean, I did a bunch of fantasy anthologies with Terry Windling. We co-edited the Mythic series for YA, and we did 6 volumes of fairy tales for adults and 3 volumes for fairy tales for middle grade. But I actually do prefer horror now these days, although I'm trying to acquire more science fiction for Tor.com. I acquire short fiction and novellas for Tor.com and Nightfire, the Tor's horror imprint. And I've actually bought a few science fiction novellas. Paul Cornell has one coming out. Kelly Robeson had one and has another one coming out that are both science fiction. So, I'm kind of dipping back into science fiction, but horror, I guess it's my first love at this point. Or my best love.
Well, we love hearing that, of course. You must have a great deal of admiration for writers in general to be an editor all this time, dealing with such a variety of writers, styles of stories, and that kind of thing. Why did you end up going full bore into editing and not really go into writing on your own?
I've never had an idea in my life. Really, I have nothing to write about. Yes, I wrote really, really horrible doggerel poetry in college, but who doesn't? All right.
Right.
Other than that, I hate writing. I mean, it's agony for me to write my introductions in any nonfiction. And I honestly have no fictional ideas. I'm happy to work with other people on their ideas. In a way, I look at it as it's a different brain, part of my brain working. In fact, Richard Christian Matheson, who I used to be closer to, but I hardly ever see anymore. But I remember he came to New York once. He said, "How can you be an editor if you don't write?" I said, "I'm a better editor because I don't write, because I'm not trying to impose my view on your fiction. I have no dog in this race, shall we say. I am
Right.
trying to work with the author to get their vision onto the page. I am not trying to get them to write in my style because I have no style. Um, so I think, I mean, there have been traditionally, and there still are plenty of editor/writers, but I think that kind of editor has to really be careful that they're not trying to impose their own desires as a writer onto their authors. So that's why I love working with writers and trying to get their stories as good as they can be, or better. Great, to make a decent story really, really good or terrific, or help them with that.
Right. So on stories that, let's say, I think most of your stuff is invite only, right?
Most
Or
of my anthologies, most of my original anthologies, the reprint ones are well, the best horror, of course, is not. I mean, try to read everything in the best that's available. As
right,
far as my reprint anthologies, I start with an idea and I think of some writers whose work I remember liking, there's particular stories, and then what I will do is like do a you know what do you call, a burst of emails to a bunch of writers who I've worked with or at least know of, who I think might have written in the theme. Like I just wrote to a whole bunch of people about body horror. Have you written body horror? Think you have anything? And some people say, I've written, yes, I've written this story.
right,
So in a sense, and I've had a couple of open anthologies, but only when I've done it with co-editing. Like Lisa Morton and I, we did an HWA Haunted Nights anthology, and that one we had open. It was under the aegis of HWA, and we had certain slots open for the members, and anyone could submit. We had first readers. I mean, people had read all the stories, and they gave us the top, I don't know, 20 or 30, and we chose from that. And same thing with Nick Mamitas and I, we worked on Haunted Legends, which was an urban legend kind of anthology. Nick wanted to have an open reading period for a short time, for like 2 weeks. I said, fine, as long as you read all those stories. And again, he handed over like 20 or 30 stories. We read them. I read them. And the ironic thing is that I think we only took one story by someone neither of us had ever heard of. I mean, all the other stories that came in over the transom, they were by people whose work we might have read. So it wasn't like it's like the really good stuff came from people who were already professional or
right.
published. even though we
Now,
have to open.
does the tour.com, though, that works entirely differently for you, right?
Yes, I mean, when they first started out, they had a slush pile. They had, anyone could submit. But then, I mean, there are so many editors working for the tour.com website. Anyone basically a tour can acquire short fiction. And then there are several consultants, me, Jonathan Strawn, Ann Vandermeer, Christy Yant, I think, and there are a handful of others who are freelancing. And basically we can buy any short story we choose to. They don't have to be vetted. But that means there's so much short fiction already coming in from people we know and work with that there's no room for slush. And although occasionally, I guess, I think more in the novella program, they open it up periodically. But we basically don't need a slush pile anymore because we have so many different editorial voices acquiring for the website.
Right. Now, I know
Which
you
is a
do
shame,
multiple.
which I'm sorry, which I feel badly because I know it's harder. It makes it harder for new writers to get in. However, we do read. I mean, I read. As I said, I try to cover everything in horror every year. I mean, I miss things.
Right.
So if you get my attention by writing something really good and it's published someplace, I will notice you, and I may ask you to write something for me. Excuse me.
That's fair. That's fair because there isn't even enough magazine stuff out there to take up short stories. You do what, an average of about 5 anthologies a year, not counting best of?
Oh no. Excuse me. I do the most 2.
And then you do the best of on top of that. I get that. But sometimes you must be scrambling for an anthology theme idea. I mean, how does that process work? And basically, of course, what's the weirdest theme you've been able to pull off?
Oh, I don't know. The weirdest theme? The ones that I can't sell are the weirdest themes. And I can't sell them.
That you'd like to sell.
I mean, I've been trying to sell an insect anthology, reprint or original. And it's really difficult to get anyone interested. I think people think it's too creepy.
Well, come on, body horror. That's what the new one is. That's about as creepy as it comes.
Well, that was something that Jacob Weissman and I both came up with. I'm always trying to figure out what to do next for Jacob at Tachyon. And he always wants a really broad theme that basically can encompass mainstream writing and all kinds of writing. And I think he may have come up with the idea of the body horror because body horror is not in my wheelhouse. It's something that I read it more than I thought I did. Once I did research in it, I realized, I've read a lot of body horror and I really like it. But it wasn't something that I would ordinarily think, I'm going to do a body horror anthology. So I'm sure it was Jacob's idea. And then I realized
you can blame him.
I can blame him. And then I realized that it would work. That okay,
right.
I can do that. And then I came up with a lot of stories that I remembered. Okay, this is body horror. It's like it depends on how you look at it and what the variant sub themes are. And I really enjoy doing that. I've done that. I did with Tachyon. I did the Final Cuts, which was a reprint movie anthology, because Casey Lansing and I tried to sell an original anthology of movie horror, and we couldn't. That was several years ago. So I thought, well, okay, maybe I could do a reprint one. And Jacob said, fine. And then after that, I actually was able to sell Final Cuts, which was an all original movie horror anthology. I mean, I went to Casey and I said, I hope you don't mind. Is it okay if I use the title? Because it looks like we couldn't sell the book, and I'm doing this. And she said, fine.
Right.
So sometimes a reprint anthology will spur enough interest that I can actually sell an original anthology after that to someone else, occasionally.
Did you change your vision of what body horror was, the definition of body horror, as you started putting the anthology together?
Well,
what did you find didn't fit also?
well, you may notice the subtitle "Extreme Stories of Body
Right.
Horror." That's a selling point. I mean, we didn't know what to call it in a subtitle. To me, body horror is extreme. So, and I don't like what is usually called extreme horror, which I guess I put together with splatterpunk, kind of.
Uh-huh.
And so, doing research as to what actually how people define body horror and what it means to different people, and looking for stories that use some of those definitions, which are bodily mutilation, the impingement, the breach of the body, transformation, and all those things. It kind of piqued my interest in and my memory of stories that would work. Okay. Some that I didn't think that you would never think would be right for the anthology I put in, and I think they do work perfectly. So, yes, as I worked on that particular anthology, my ideas about the whole sub theme of body horror maybe changed. I don't think, I mean, there are some stories that I think are pretty graphic and grisly and disgusting in the book. But
Right.
on the whole, I wanted to show that they don't have to all be graphic and disgusting and grisly. And there's still body horror. And they're still really disturbing. And from the reviews, I think most people got that or get that. Although
Right.
there's still, there are going to be people, there are going to be readers who say, "Oh, that's not horrific. That's not disgusting enough. That's not body horror." And then other people, "That's too disgusting. I don't want to read that." So I have to reach the people in the middle who are open to what body horror can be.
Does that does that in any way mean that you would water down your anthology to fit the biggest demographic for sales reasons?
Oh, not at all. I mean, I wouldn't know how to do that. I picked the stories that I really liked that worked for me as stories. I mean, I find that an awful lot of horror starts in the middle of a situation of a scene, and so of vignettes rather than horror stories. To me, plotting, to me, the arc of a story is really important. And in fact, the first story that I started with, Traveler's Rest, by Ray Cluley, starts off a little slowly. And I don't even think I realized it. I mean, I guess I realized it. When I put a story first, I usually try to make it emblematic of what the anthology is about overall. And I want to draw the reader in. I don't want it to be too complicated. It has to be a kind of a simple plot. I mean, not simple and silly or stupid, but simple that you can get into it really quickly, that you
Right.
know what's going on. You don't want to start with a story that's so complicated and confusing that that the reader's totally lost. And it wasn't until I read a review, and the reviewer said, "Oh, the story started like really quiet. I thought I was going to hate it. It wasn't going to be, this or that." And then oh my goodness, I really liked it. And then so I reread it. And I said, "Oh yeah, it did start pretty quiet, and it builds up." And I think that is perfect for a first story. And I think it ends up pretty disturbing, and so that's good. That's a good thing. So no, it's not like excuse me. It's not like I censored myself at picking stories. I picked stories that I like. I did not choose stories that I'll never choose stories, especially for a reprint anthology where you have so much, you have the whole history of the horror field to choose from. I'm not
Right.
going to pick stories I hate just to sell the anthology. I'll try to pick stories that I really like from writers of all different kinds, different types. There are people, there are mainstream writers who write body horror. Some of them I could get and some I couldn't, or some of them I couldn't find the right story. But it's not like I censor myself or say I'm not going to use that as too disgusting. It's just that, oh, it's disgusting and I don't like it kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I was reading one of your earlier interviews with somebody, and you said you did not expect to be scared by fiction. Is fiction the key word here? I mean, I
Yes.
feel that way too. I like it. A good feeling of dread seems to be
Yeah.
about the best I can get. but I just wanted to know if we have the same reasons. Is it scared because it's fiction and you can get scared from nonfiction still?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I get scared from real life.
Right.
Well, what's going around all around us. But no, fiction does not scare me, and I don't expect it to. Now, I have seen a couple of movies. I don't know. I watch Alien, and I've watched it many times, and it still gets me every time. The chest burster. But did it scare me? I'm not sure. It disturbs me, And I watched.
Right.
I mean, I give an example of something that I saw years ago when it first came out. I actually saw the Carpenter, The Thing, in a screening room in New York, and I was blown away by it. I was freaked out by it. I have not been able to watch it again since I first saw it when it came out. But did it scare me? I don't think it did. It's not like it scared me and I thought it could happen to me. It bothered me and I found it extremely disturbing, but I don't find it scary. So you see the difference, I think?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, people have walked into the store and said, "What's the scariest book you've got in here?" And I go, "The newspaper. It's behind the desk. Do you want to read it?"
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the nonfiction. It's the
Yeah,
real stuff.
right. I don't expect fiction to scare me. I expected to do other things, and I wanted to do other things when it's horror. I mean, I want to be deeply disturbed and to think about it and and find it unnerving
Right.
and maybe upsetting, but I don't expect to be scared. It's not going to scare me.
Did you notice that we had a pandemic? I mean, I say that because you've been working from home forever.
I know that's true. It. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it hasn't affected me as much as it has a lot of other people because I do work from home. I actually moved in the middle of the pandemic. In December, I moved from the far west side of the village to the far east side of the village in Manhattan. and that was the only big change. I mean, I didn't travel. I mean, I usually travel once every month or once every 2 months, twice a month or whatever, to various conventions and visiting my mom and just visiting friends. And that I didn't do for like a year or more. And so that was different. But other than that, I went out. I went out with friends to eat. We ate outside. I ate outside all winter last year, and I loved it. It was kind of refreshing.
I
And
saw those pods that New York had developed for
yeah,
some restaurants. Those
well,
clear
some of them are
igloos.
not. Some of them I do not feel safe in. A pod to me is like there's no ventilation. You have to really keep 2 or 3 sides open. And when you do that, they did put heaters in sometimes. And I would sometimes eat in my winter coat, and that was okay. And the only downside is your food gets cold faster,
Right.
But I really enjoyed seeing friends that way, and we ate outside. And I expect to do it this winter too. I'm still not eating inside very much. I'm still mostly eating outside in New York anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I understand that here in LA too. So,
Yeah, and I was
um,
lucky. My mom's okay. I mean, I was worried. She lives in Florida, and at first it was like horrendous trying to get her the vaccine. She's 94, and then she actually got breakthrough COVID after the vaccine. But luckily, she was able to get the monoclonal antibodies within a day or two, and the next day she was fine. So I feel she was really lucky. And I didn't knock on wood. I haven't gotten it yet, and I'm hoping I won't.
I
So
guess if you grab that dewormer soon enough, you get.
right. Yes, yes.
Now you've
So
worked
if
with
you're a horse.
you've worked with quite a few other editors in
Mhm.
putting books together. Are you ever surprised by how other editors work? Do you think you work methodically different from other editors?
Well, you mean the ones
Because
I've
you've
worked
been doing your way a long time.
well, when I see what other editors do and we talk about our process, but as far as collaborating, that's a different thing. Now I can see when some editors I read what other editors do at times. I read their interviews, and I know some editors when they're editing an anthology, they don't buy any of the stories until they know they get all the stories in. I don't do that. I get a story and I love the story and I buy it immediately. I pay, I do a contract and pay the writer. As far as collaborating, I've, I realize I've collaborated with 2 people who are editors but are also writers. Lisa Morton. I mean, Lisa Morton. I was going to say Mason. There's a Lisa Mason, but Lisa Morton and Nick Mamatas and Terry Windling. When you co-edit, you have to agree in the beginning how you're going to separate the process and what you're going to do. Who's going to edit what? How are you going to acquire things? When I've acquired with both Nick and Lisa, we agreed if both of us have to love a story. If one of us, although we each have one free story to hate and one free story to love, right? Although if one person hates a story, then we'll probably let it go. I mean, that happened with me and Terry. She hated a story, and I ended up taking it to something else. So you have to agree on how you're going to work together beforehand. I am a hands-on editor. I'm loath to let anyone else do the line edit, the final line edit.
Right.
Because it's going to have my name on it, and I don't know how other people line edit. Jeff Vandermeer did a book on writing and editing. Well, it was on writing. I forget the title of it. And he had me and Gardner Dozois edit the same story. It might have only been a few pages. And it was supposed to be in the book, and it ended up not in the book. And I think it might have ended up online. And I was trying to, I wish I could remember. I wish I could find it so I could look again to see what the difference was in what we decided to change or not change or suggest or ask the author about. Because I'm assuming that very few editors edit exactly the same way, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm assuming that too. As an editor of an anthology, are you more representative of the publisher or the writers, or neither?
Excuse me, the writer. I mean, I know I'm working for the publisher, but I feel I'm representing the writer, and I'm representing the writer's interests, not the publisher's. God help me. I don't know if I should say that. I mean, obviously, I don't want to offend my publishers, but if they trust me to buy a book edited by me, then they have to know what they're getting. The only time I've had a major problem, Terry Windley and I were co-editing an anthology. It was bought by the publisher, and the publisher handed it off to an editor. And then the editor, we didn't know any of these people. It was like a big deal made by my agent, and we figured we'd work with the editor. The editor quit and was given to a junior editor. And when we handed the book in, the junior editor wanted to cut out some stories, wanted to do a line edit. I mean, basically, they wanted to over edit us. And we said, you can't do that. It's like, you paid us. We have 50 years of editing between us. You're not going to line it. You're not going to over edit us. And, and basically our agent said, we're going to pull the book if you don't leave us alone. I mean, she was, the junior editor, I don't think had ever edited anthology, had no clue what she was doing. And, she said, oh, this story doesn't fit. It should go out. And we say, no, that's not happening. So that's the only time when we've had to actually stand up. That's what an agent's for. Your agent is to protect you and your interests. We would have given the money back and said, screw you, we're going elsewhere. But the publisher agreed with us. We made a few changes, like I think maybe 3 suggestions that we agreed with. And that was that. The downside, of course, was that editor was never on our side. But whenever a book is orphaned, that's always the chance you're going to take, that the person who takes it on is not going to be committed to it anyway. So, they didn't do anything with the book, and it didn't sell very well, which it might not have anyway. But, so that's an unfortunate story, but it happens,
I've had 2 of my books orphaned. And the worst to me was Dark Delicacies 2. The publishing company went under or was bought out, and it went to somebody else. So it was a horror anthology, that came out in November instead of when it was intended in October, and that killed everything.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I remember when remember Del Abyss. Of course, you remember Del Abyss.
Sure.
Well, they Jeannie Cavellis bought Little Deaths, She bought the British. It was a British book, and she bought the American edition. And then she bought Twisted the Tail, which was a cat horror anthology. And she left. And we had an uncollected king in there. The cat, I forget the name of the story. I mean, it's been collected since. But we wanted to take it back because I don't even remember who got it. I mean, I don't remember who the editor became, but they basically, did nothing. And we said we'd like to buy it back, my agent and I. And they said, no, we're really behind it. Yeah, sure. Well, nothing happened, of course.
Right.
It's like, well, why did they do that? They didn't have to do that. They could have just given us the book back, and we could have sold to someone who gave a damn.
That's right. But they don't do that. They don't work that way. And
Sometimes
besides,
they do. Some do, but
the publishing industry moves at glacial speed, except when it's against you.
Right, and then they all eat each other up.
Right. Yeah, they're eating their own tails half the time.
Yeah.
Well, look, I got to tell you, it's been a joy having you here. I am so happy that you were here. We're talking, or we just finished speaking about her new book. We'll put the stuff at the bottom down there on it. But it's the Body Shocks, and just came out today. And I hope you're all looking forward to it. And if you're can I say, hardcore horror fan, you're really going to like this. But I think it's for everybody across the board. But thank you very much, Ellen. Anything else you want to let them know out there? Or?
Yeah, I just want to say to Jamie. Jamie's asked about the insect anthology. Yes, I want to do an insect anthology. Insect spiders, reprint or not.
There you go. Maybe a scorpion story can even fit in there. Right?
Maybe, I'm sure it can.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for watching. When you guys, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel that has all of the interviews lined up, be sure to subscribe and you'll be told when the next one goes up there. For now, bye.
Bye. Thank you.